A problem is when my phone is broken. That has a solution. We can fix it or replace it. That's a problem. Problems have solutions. Poverty is not a problem. Poverty is the result of complex systems that are currently perfectly designed to get that result. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't try and shift it, but we don't shift it in the same way we problem solve. To shift it, we actually shift the system that is creating that result, which is very different than solving the problem of my broken phone.
Welcome to System Catalyst, the show that cracks the code for making the world a better place. I'm your host, English Saul. Today, I am joined by Daniela Papi-Thornton, an educator, facilitator, and author whose work focuses on system-led leadership. She has taught at leading institutions, including the Yale School of Management, the Watson Institute, and Oxford's Said Business School, where she also served as deputy director of the Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship. Alongside her academic work, Daniela has advised and supported a wide range of organizations, from public companies to private foundations, to help them navigate complexity and advance systems change. Daniela, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So I, have been such an avid fan of yours for a long time, getting your newsletters and hearing all about your work. I would love to know, I just want to kick us off with what actually got you interested in the work of systems change? Because it seems like something that you live and breathe and eat and sleep so voraciously. And I'm just so interested to know, how did you start this? What was the moment in time where you were like, yes, this makes so much sense to me?
It's, all of our stories and all systems change in general can only be told as a story backwards, right? So I don't think there was a moment in the moment where I'm like, this is the moment, but afterward I'm like, oh, that was the moment,
Yeah.
So I worked in Cambodia and there was the same sort of thing. I didn't have a moment where I moved to Cambodia. I had a moment where I organized a trip there and I organized a bike ride and we raised money and we funded schools and we did all these things. And then all of a sudden then I stayed longer and then I had already been there for a year and a half. And I'm like, I guess I live here, right? It's, life just kind of goes along. But I lived in Cambodia for 6 years and ran an education and youth leadership organization and a hybrid education travel company. I didn't have these words at the time that, didn't realize it was a hybrid social enterprise, all these things, but probably what it was. And we started out very much not doing systems change work, We're like, let's build schools, let's give bikes away, let's, give books and blah, blah, blah. Kind of these interventions rather than a look at the wider, what was happening in the wider system. And so then with a lot of wise interventions of other people who helped take my kind of type A personality of we're going to fix it to be let's ask some questions, right? Shifting that work was a big shift for me of we moved into this idea of we're doing these 5-year partnerships and we're looking at how do you support the basically PTA, different name there, but how does that be different genders, different ages? How do we help them understand their rights of getting, instead of just giving money, how do we understand their rights to get the money that's meant to be going for the teachers that maybe didn't arrive? Things like that. And then that process happened for a few years. And we realized we had young people watching at the window. And those young people watching at the window were the ones who were we want to learn this stuff. They're we're going to dig a fish pond, we're going to do these leadership things that you're teaching. And they started to, and the commune chief noticed it. And so there was this emergent piece that wasn't our intention. And right before I left Cambodia, and went and did my MBA at Oxford and ended up working at the Skoll Center, we had this convening and we said, well, let's change our focus and let's actually take a longer game view and let's invest in those young people, because who are we to be redesigning this education system? Why don't we invest in them right now over the next 5, 10, 15 years, and they come back and they change the education systems, and they'll be the teachers and the common chief and digital. And so we are now 10 years from that decision, 20 years into the organization. We just had this past December was 20 years. And the new director of the organization was a third grader when we had started. Wow. The commune chief's assistant was one of those kids also sitting at the window, and so they're doing it, and they're creating the change. And so a lot of my work really stems from my own mistakes, right? Like I went into Cambodia like, I'm here to help because I was told that I come from a rich country and we're supposed to bestow our benevolence. And watching that, we have to learn, we have to like earn the right to bestow that benevolence and without causing harm. And we're still going to maybe make mistakes, but if there's mistakes we can avoid making by asking more beautiful and better questions, let's start doing that, right? And so that's really what catalyzed me into that work. And then going to Oxford and doing my MBA, working at the school center, getting to teach at a lot of places. I'm like, oh, we are teaching that same mindset that I had, which was like, I'm going to make an app for farmers. I've never been to that country. I've never farmed, but my university is going to give me credit. Because why? We didn't have any university classes in this social innovation, social entrepreneurship, et cetera space that were about understanding the problem, that were about understanding the system, that were even just about looking at complexity. We only had things on hackathons, how to solve it, how to pitch your solution, right? And so my work has been like, how do we shift that conversation and create the incentives, the accolades, the support, the curricula to help people find the best place to put their work in the world and contribute, because we can each contribute in any problem. We just need to figure out learn more and find our place in that work.
I mean, I think that that's so true. And hearing you talk about your experience in Cambodia, I feel really similar in how I got to this place, because I sort of came of age in the philanthropic world when I feel like it was right at the time, 10 years ago or so, where everybody was just sort of to be like, maybe we shouldn't just plant a grant, like just drop a grant in to a random place and fingers crossed that it's going to work, right? And the privilege that was afforded to me was to travel to many places. And I think I too sort of was educated in this sort of way of, oh, well, we go in, we're philanthropists. We just sort of get to do, these amazing things, and we give money and then we witness what our money has done, and over time, and quite honestly, with a lot of the learnings coming from my family's foundation, it was more like, oh, right, maybe we should ask a question or two before we just, jet set with our, big ideas. And it's really, what I love to see too is how that is affecting even, especially like my sort of rising generation of philanthropy. And the majority of my peers that I get to interact with, are really big on like unrestricted dollars, unrestricted funds. And how do we just sort of say, we're really just putting the money where the money needs to be, and we're not trying to dictate what goes on. And so I'm really curious, in your experience with sort of systems change, what I think there's a lot of people who do want to help, and sometimes we just miss the boat, right? We just sort of miss the boat. But to your point that everybody's got a role to play, how do we think about systems change now, and how do we think about funding systems change efforts?
Beautiful question. And thank you for sharing your story into this. So, as you know from someone doing this work, it's like by nature, philanthropy is the least held accountable, right? Because there's not like this pressure, if you're doing some really corrupt, crazy stuff, right? Maybe someone eventually, and even then takes a long time to hold those people accountable. But,
yep.
There's not like accountability that says like, did your money really do good, right? And so that accountability has to come internally, right? And so I agree, there's been a pendulum swing. It used, a lot of organizations still operate this way, where it's like, tell me why we should give it to you and not them. Like, how are you better than them, right? And so there's still a lot of like that kind of philanthropy. Apply here and we'll decide if you're better than them. We'll give you some money, right? Okay, fine. The pendulum swing of saying, let's give money unrestricted. There's benefits to I can never remember her name, but there's a woman who ran the Len Kelly Chase Foundation, and she talks about how the role of philanthropy should be to create the conditions for systems change. So no longer measuring, well, we built 74 schools and we helped 642,000 kids and like instead saying these types of questions. We allowed our funding. We've extended the duration of our funding. We've extended the flexibility of our funding because we know that system change work has to allow for, shifts. We have actually funded knowledge sharing and collaborations. We have funded work that is like foundational to what this cross-pollination, right? Whatever that looks like for you in your work. But there is a difference still that I think is missing. That is, the foundation should still, in my view, have a point of view. Because we've kind of gone that, one view in the old way was like, we're going to pick you and we're going to decide who's good and we're going to give you money. So then people are like, oh, we should just give them money. But what's missing here is, where's the foundation's point of view around the future they want to see in regards to an issue? So let's say you're a foundation and you really care about, for us, that work in Cambodia. Let's say you cared about education in Cambodia. If you're a foundation there, I would love to see you say, I want to map what's going on here. I actually want to understand. I don't want to have you tell me what's going on in your world and you tell me what's going on in your world and you tell me what's going on in your world. And I'm analyzing each of you as if you were your own little microcosm. Instead, I want to have a point of view of what's going on in this system. So I'm going to learn from all of you. And ideally, I'm even paying you for your time to teach me, and we're I'm gathering, I'm learning. But now I have a point of view that says, actually, collectively, maybe we all have a point of view. I call that point of view a theory of systems change. Mm-hmm. I want to kill theory of change. Here's why I don't like theory of change. Individual organizations are here's how my organization is going to do this thing, and then it's going to impact that thing, and then this is how we are going to change the world. So A, it's egoic. Mm-hmm. B, it's linear. Systems don't change. We can't predict now that A is going to be B and turn into C and turn into D. And that's the whole point of complexity, is if we could predict it, it wouldn't be complex, right? And then C, and this is really important, is theory of change is often done only from an organization's lens. You do a little retreat, you and your team, and you make your theory of change. Mm-hmm. What we're missing is a collective group. So let's say I'm a philanthropist that cares about education in Cambodia. Gather a bunch of people. Talk about what you want the future to look like. Talk about the future that you're working into, right? And then that organization that's giving out money has to have some point of view that says, we want to help get there. So now our philanthropy is going in to, we have a wider collective theory of system change. If we believe that if some of these different levers are pulled, these things that we don't like, or these opportunities that aren't yet there, we believe that we might be moving towards them in a healthier outcomes that we like. Okay, now I have a theory of contribution. Each of those individual organizations has a theory of contribution, but so does the foundation. Mm-hmm. Here is our theory of how we're going to contribute to that shift. And then we're going to measure ourselves towards our contribution to shifting the system, instead of measuring ourselves by these outcomes that we can't take credit for and can't really, that some of them are really far away. I don't know if I explained that really well, but basically I think that the future of systems-led philanthropy would be helping support those collective theory of systems change, and then saying, oh, we believe that needs to be this market for how education is done here. We believe that there's some opportunities in policy, but there's also some opportunities, mental models, or some opportunities to share knowledge. We as a funder have a point of view of how we want to use our money to contribute to that shift in that system, and then measure ourselves towards that.
I think that's I feel so strongly that I feel like I agree with you so much on this, because I also feel like when you take like a group of funders, for example, we all have our own, I think, our point of view of how we, could see the world changing, which levers we need to pull. But then there's also funding mechanisms to take into consideration. And it's almost like there's different funders have different competitive advantage of how they fund, right? Our foundation isn't going to fund the same way that, the
Gates Foundation.
The Gates Foundation would, or even the, British government would fund. Or so how might we think about, well, if they're funding this, then that attaches to that lever. How can then I come in and fund this? And so I wanted to ask you about, you created the Impact Gaps Canvas.
Mm-hmm.
How does that tie into this conversation? Tell me a little bit about that, what that does.
So that is a super basic framework. It's probably more of a mindset than like a fill in the blank type of tool, although some people use it in that way. But the way I think about it, I always say it's common sense and not common practice. And what I mean by that is that anytime I've taught a class or a cohort of people, and we're kind of mapping systems as part of it, there's always 1, 2, 3, small number often who deeply care about the issue they're mapping. Like their family has been impacted. They have been impacted by it, whatever that is, right? Those people are not like trying to be a founder or caring about their business model. What they care about is actually creating change in the thing, because the thing is really important to them, right?
Yeah.
So the people who really care about the thing, they ask 2 sets of questions. They ask, what's happening? Right? They're not like they might see, oh, there's some people who don't have homes and they're living at the end of my road, but they're not, they're actually asking the question like, how many more are there? How many was there last year? How many are predicted for next year? What's, in an ideal world, we'd want to know, like, what are all the types of skills that are within this community already? How are those skills being used? Where, all sorts of these types of questions that we would want to say, like, what's happening, right? And so that's kind of like a problems and systems view, right? Who benefits from it staying how it is right now? Somebody does, right? There's like all these kind of questions. And the other piece that they would ask, and it's similar to the story you just said, English, it's like, who's already trying to shift this, right? Because when you know that you're actually trying to shift something, you're not trying to solve it. You can't solve a system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You can't solve a symptom. Most of the things that we're trying to shift are actually, they're not problems. Poverty is not a problem. Poverty is the result of complex systems that are currently perfectly designed to get those results. Okay, so poverty is not a problem. A problem is when my phone is broken. That has a solution. We can fix it or replace it. That's a problem. Problems have solutions. Poverty is not a problem. Poverty is the result of complex systems that are currently perfectly designed to get that result. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't try and shift it, but we don't shift it in the same way we problem solve. Mm-hmm. To shift it, we actually shift the system that is creating that result, which is very different than solving the problem of my broken phone, right?
As I'm hearing you talk, I'd love to know, when we have system catalysts on this show, they often are describing, the system that they are aiming to influence. And so many of them have gone through that mental journey of like, oh, I'm not actually solving this problem. I'm spending a lot of time combating this symptom when in reality, I have to take a step back and I have to start kind of understanding the entirety of the system and how do I move it. And so you see this metamorphosis of social entrepreneurs being like, oh, there's this, I got to go be a systems change person or a systems catalyst.
Yeah.
How often do you see that? And how does that, because I often find myself in conversation with folks about kind of debating the definition of scale and scale looking like almost like, social entrepreneur systems are just being, here, we're going to expand to more places versus this shift from kind of social entrepreneur to systems catalyst? How is that something you think about?
Two stories. So one is from my own story. I did a TEDx talk about social entrepreneurship 10 years ago, and I used the term systems change leader. And I was basically saying, like, we don't need more people to be like, I'm going to solve this problem. We need people to contribute to system change. And I was calling it systems change leader. And I have people come up to me after talks and be like, Daniela, I thought I was a social entrepreneur, but now I know I'm a systems change leader. I am changing the whole system. And I was like, I have done something wrong here. This is not the message that I meant to give, right? And so I started to change my work. I call it systems-led leadership because you can take a nap and the system's going to change, right? This is not about like if you fell asleep in 2019 and you woke up in 2021 and you're like trying to reduce carbon emissions from airplanes, like you didn't change that. You took a nap, right? Like it changed, right? So the system is going to change if you take a nap. So being systems led to me is like, it's not a thing you have to do every day. You can't sit at the 30,000 foot spot every day. Some days you're going to do the very linear work of hiring the person, making the ad, paying the taxes, doing the expenses, making the website. Like those things are linear. You can set a project plan. You can use your type A personality and break it down and do the goals, right? But when it comes to like how we operate in the systems work, sometime once a week, once a month, 3 times a year, whatever that looks like, you're moving into that 30,000 foot level and you're saying, does this kind of theory of how we were trying to contribute here, is that still hold? What's going on in the system? Not that we can take credit for so we can write a little report and send it to our funders, but just so that we can look at, has anything changed? What's changing? Because it's changing, right? And so being systems led is we're adjusting based on what's happening out there. And so I want to tell you a story. Tara Winkler is like such a beautiful story of this. You're saying someone like kind of moving into that work. And she uses that same story with the babies in the water. But she was this baby when she started this work. She was a teenager. She's Australian. She went to Cambodia. She volunteered on one of these, pay to volunteer, got to this orphanage, realized these kids were really being abused and it was really harmful situation. So she goes home, she raises money, comes back, and then she adopts all these kids essentially and creates her own orphanage, right? And she won like Australian Young Person of the Year and all these things. And I wrote I had like a really robust blog at the time living in Cambodia, and I wrote a blog about her and I never met her. And I was saying like, this is not about her, but it's just me saying, do we really want to be celebrating this? Do we want to say, young people, like, go adopt some kids, like celebrating the, like, oh, you didn't have the skills, but you've done the thing. I was like, how do we instead celebrate the things that are like, how do you gain the skills to do the thing? So I got so much pushback from her parents, her family, all these people were like, and I'm like, not questioning your daughter. I'm sure she's amazing, but I'm just questioning this level of celebration, right? So years later, she reached out to me and we eventually hung out. We are now friends. She was like, you were right. Thank you. And, I'm writing a book called How Not to Start an Orphanage. And she's like, and I want to quote you in it or something,
Wow.
And then Tara and I would go like 5 years or 10 years and not talk. And then we reconnected, in the last 5 years. And they're basically like, oh, we're looking at this even deeper level. We've realized that now we've created all these little nonprofits that are funded through foreign money and foreign decision making. And so they've said, I can't remember their year, 2032, I don't remember what the year is, 2030, where they're localizing every single one of those nonprofits to be Cambodian run and like owned by the communities that they're serving. They're like, we don't want to be dictating how systems change in these communities. We want the communities to be doing that, right? So it's like watching her shift to like a deeper layer each time. Okay, we're saving these kids. Oh, actually, we're going to reintegrate them and create nonprofits. Okay, now we're going to we don't believe in this kind of development system. We're going to try, shift out of that. It's just the reason she does that and can do that is because she's not stuck in her ego of her solution. She's willing to throw it out and even, call the person who wrote the article, 5 years later and say, I'm shifting this, and that level of humbleness and inquiry and asking deeper questions and willingness to throw it out and start again. That's where most people get stuck because they're like, oh, I built the thing and I've started the thing and I have the people, so then we get stuck in kind of keeping our organization alive rather than going to that deeper layer. And I just want to make one quick point here that I think is super important when we talk about systems work. It's okay to work at any one of these levels, right? It's okay to collect coats and give them to people on the street who need the coats. Someone is cold today. That's fine. But if you're trying to change it so that the person isn't on the street, the coats aren't going to do that. So we need both, right? We need these people hanging out. And actually, all levels of this, if you are at the coat level and you map out the system, you might now start to give out coats at the same time and through this organization that does job training for people who are unhoused. You might say, oh, there's this other organization. They actually want to collect, first clothing for job interviews. So we're going to collect coats and that because we're now going to match to this need here. So at every level of this, us understanding the system and how we can better contribute our piece is going to improve the impact of that work. And we need people at every level.
Yes.
Right? It's just that we need to start being honest that some of this work at the top isn't going to shift that system. So if we want it to not be a problem in the future, okay, what do we need to do to stop that instead of just being the Band-Aid, right? We need both.
Yeah. I think that's an extremely important call out is that we need people at all moments of the system. The person who's trying to influence the system, when they're making those maps of who's doing what, that social entrepreneur and how and what they're doing and what they're learning is extremely important for that map or for figuring out how to move that system. And I think one organization that has done that really well of just sort of the ability to sort of think both micro and macro is Girltrek. I don't know if you've come across Girltrek. They're doing a great job, but basically it started with just Black women walking together. It was Black women and they're walking together and all of these amazing ideas and, it became this massive systems change effort, all over the US of how these sort of ripple effects come from what happens when these women are just walking together and ideating and creating sort of systems change efforts. So we'll put more about that in our show notes as well. For people, we got the opportunity to talk to one of the founders of Girltrek on here. So we do have an episode more about that. But
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Just say the emergence, right? I imagine the story of that is they started to do a thing and they didn't know what was going to come out of it, right? And something good came out and then they expanded to a different piece, right? And then something good came out or something maybe not good comes out and they realize, oh, we want to shift, right? So there's the emergence of the story. It's easy for us to tell the story backward. Tara Winkler, you did this amazing thing. It is amazing. But the part that's amazing was that in the emergence, she was willing to shift, right? and listen. And that's where we need to build those things in.
When it comes to funding the role of a systems change maker, the role of a social entrepreneur, funding systems work, what questions do I need to be asking of myself and of my funds and of the people? Like, how does that look to you?
Beautiful question. So we got hired a few years ago to work with a big organization a foundation that was moving into this migration sector. And they knew that they were actually going to be one of the biggest funders in that country, in that sector, once they arrived, right? And so they had us like look at the system, like what's already happening, what are the different leverage points, like what is possible that we could look at. And so these are like part of what we did in that. It was a lot of desk research and a lot of interviews and things, but we also funded these listening learning circles, and funded people to be part of all this work. But basically for the people in the sector to say, none of your names are going to go out of who you are and what you said and whatever. And it's not just us like listening to you to interview you. It's actually like healing circles, right? So that you're getting chance to process and work together and surface the things that are going on, and also cross-pollinate and connect in these. We funded a few sets of these of like maybe 20 or 25 people in each group in these cohorts. And so they were learning in those communities, they were connecting, there was value that was just going to come out of having done that process. But the thing that was also coming out of that process was like, where is the trauma? What's going on? What's the unhealed things? What are you struggling with on a day-to-day basis? Not just the big stuff, this policy or that, right? But the like day-to-day stuff and the things that are keeping you up at night, right? And so we were able to surface those things in this different way. And so therefore the like range of leverage points that we saw were much wider than if we had just done this desk work. And then we brought everyone together in a convening for a few days to have them make sense of this. Because like, this is your stuff. Like what's missing here? What are the interconnections that, and then of course, at some point, that foundation, that funder is going to get to decide their own contribution. I might say like, we don't want to do anything with this because we're afraid of touching politics, or we don't want to do anything of this because, A, B, and C. It's not like it's not like you do this work to find the best intervention point, right? But if you're like, I want to find the things that aren't funded here that are about healing because no one else is asking those questions, great, let's surface them and then let's find ways for you to support that, because that's the type of those are the funders that we need. So let's do that.
No, I think that, what a potent example. And like, it kind of brings me, like, no matter where we sit in the kind of funding continuum, the asymmetrical power dynamics that happen, one thing that I feel, especially when I get the privilege to travel to some of these places, is like, I remember there's nothing more, there's just nothing more potent or real, and remembering that it's like, we're all people and we're all just holding. We just are holding so much. And I remember traveling, I was in Rwanda, and I had just had like a really big day of, we got to walk with the gorillas and, go do these amazing things. And I ended up getting super dehydrated, like really sick, really dehydrated. And just remembering how all of a sudden it was like I was around all these people and they were just taking care of me because that's what we did. We were just humans. Yeah. And it wasn't, people I had known for a long time. It was just sort of these people, in Rwanda, the doctors and people that were there. And, but it's just like, I guess it's just this reminder too. It's like, we're all holding so much. And it's like, almost like sometimes when we go and we sort of sit at that opposite ends of the table and we're trying to negotiate an intervention, or we're sometimes feel so stuck in what it is we're trying to do, or what it is we're trying to say, or what it is we're trying to bring about. And I think that your anecdote is just a really healthy reminder of like how how much it's just like we're all people coming to do this work. And if we aren't able to do sort of inward reflection on all sides of the equation, we're not showing up authentically and we're not showing up with our true selves. And that's where some of this work can go wrong.
I love this other piece that I just had this beautiful conversation with a woman named Anne Sneck. I think it's her last name. She's an educator in Belgium and she's part of the Club of Rome. And she's, anyway, a really interesting human. And we were talking about, I often do a lot of work at this like complicated versus complex, right? Complicated, solve. Complex, contribute to shifting the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's this other piece that is like complicated. You focus on the problem, right? The phone is broken. Let's figure out what part is broken. Let's replace that part, right? Like it's about focusing on the problem.
Mm-hmm.
In complexity, there are no problems. Poverty is not a problem. Poverty is the result of complex systems that are currently perfectly designed to get that result, right? So there's not problems, right? There's systems that are creating results, not just one result, a landscape of results, right? So you don't change complex systems by focusing on problems. You actually envision a different future, okay? Because there are infinite possibilities of the future of that system, right? There are infinite possibilities. And I remember Muhammad Yunus did a talk once at the Skull World Forum when I was working there, and he talks about this idea of science fiction often predates science, right? So you like invent something as a science fiction story, and then science eventually catches it and creates it. He's like, we need social fiction, right? We need to tell these stories, and that's the reality. That is how complex systems change, is, not often cognitively by like drawing a vision board and da-da-da, but it's like innovators, people go out at the edges, right? And the margins, and there's mutations that happen, right? And I love Anne's work. She was talking about this idea that we have this like old frame view of universities and education, where it's like, you go there and then you learn some stuff. And it's like fed into you. And now your job is to go find a job where it can use that stuff. She's like, well, what if we treat the young people as the mutations, right? It's not the old people who create the future. It's the young people. They're the ones who are going to have to live it, right? So they're the ones kind of mutating, creating the future. So they go out. What future do you want, young people? How do you want to contribute? Now you get to demand to the universities, hey, educators, because you still need the experts and the people to learn from. But you're saying, teach me some stuff that these are the things I want to learn, because I have a view of the future I want to create. And I want to learn this stuff so I can contribute to shifting it, right? You're not learning stuff and going to find a job. You're envisioning a future, figuring out how you want to help create it, and learning the stuff that you need to do that. To me, that's like so empowering and so much more in alignment with like the emerging futures. It's not like we sit here and we're like, AI is going to take over the world. What do we want AI to do? What do we want it to be like? We're acting as if we don't have control in these decisions, if we don't have agency, if we don't have a way to contribute. We do. And I can tell you one quick example is if you go on ChatGPT and you ask it a question and it doesn't know the answer, it's going to make it up. Because it acts like an American. It's like, and then you question it, and it's like, oh yeah, you're right. You ask like Perplexity, it's very European. It'll sometimes say like, there's not enough information really to say this. I'm like, there's some humbleness built into this system that wasn't built into that other system, right? Because it was designed. We actually created that, and we have to acknowledge that the future is ours to create. So what do we want to create?
One thing we do on this podcast is we sort of ask our guests to leave our listeners with a question or a thought for them to really contemplate, wherever they're listening to this podcast, maybe on the commute home or on their walk. But is there anything that you want to leave our listeners reflecting on, just a question or a thought?
I want to leave them with a thought, and I also want to leave them with an offer, if that's okay too.
Yes.
I'll start with the offer. So the offer is I run something called Systems Change Educators Unite. There's periods between those words because it's not system change educators. It's people that are working in system stuff. It's people like you who are like trying to create these conversations around systems change. It's people in change, social innovation, social entrepreneurship, all that. And then educators across that realm who are trying to unite in these times of great divide. And in my view, part of the way that we unite is we stop being in blame, shame, it's your fault, it's their fault, or whoever. We turn around together and we say, I am so curious. How did we get here? Right? Like, what is the system that is creating these results? And how do we together want to shift that? Because these results are not serving any of us, right? So that work is for anyone who wants to learn about system stuff and who wants to hang out with their people who want to learn about system stuff. And if you use capital letters, join us, all one word, JOINUS, you can get a free month trial there. And for anyone on your podcast that wants to join us, we have some super cool talks coming up and workshops and ways to process together. But my leaving for you is really that, is like, in these divided times, how do you want to be a contribution? What seeds do you want to be nourishing of this future that you would be psyched about? Because when we're in the grief, we forget and we think that it's always going to be in grief. It's not. So yeah, just an invite for like, as you go to sleep tonight, inviting your dreams to help you, as you meditate, as you just go about your walk in your day, like get into that beautiful mode of creation with the universe and ask, like, what is mine to do here? And how do I want to contribute in these times?
That's amazing. Daniela, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. And I can't wait to put all of this stuff in the show notes for our listeners to explore. And we just appreciate you so much and appreciate the work you do and coming on the show. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to get to know you more English, and thanks for doing this work. It's important.